My full name is Judith Miriam. Siegel was my maiden name, and I am going by Goodman now. I can remember horses the sound of hoofs clopping outside, to deliver the milk, and ice in the ice box and stuff like that. I mean, I feel more at home at Wilder Ranch than I do now in anybody else's home. My parents both worked. My father was the director of a Jewish community center. It's like the YMCA, but it's Jewish. My mother was a school teacher. My mother never learned to drive. My father was the driver. My father loved to drive, and almost every summer, because his parents lived in Los Angeles, we would drive across the country in whatever raggedy car we owned at the time. And so I was familiar with the whole country, geographic country, from the time I was 2 years old. There were still signs on places that said no Jews allowed. I was very aware that there was something about being Jewish that was not acceptable to the larger part of the world. The 70,000 or 80,000 people in Atlantic City were Jewish, and it was a real strong community, and although I don't think we knew exactly what terrible things were happening, this was a very unifying time for Jews. I can remember vaguely how shocked we all were by the first newsreels of the concentration camps. But during World War II, this was passionate. This was a passionate feeling. We were positive about our country. We were positive about what my dad was doing overseas and my mother was doing as the USO director. I mean, it just went to my heart. And so I ended up in Colorado, very far from home.
Were you happy about that?
Well, no, I had never been far from home. It was a daunting experience.
How'd you get there? On train?
Train. I remember saying goodbye, Mom and Dad.
Did they cry?
They did, and I did. Once I didn't let them see me cry. It was the first time in my life I had not been my father's child. I didn't know I had anything else in me until I got loose from their influence, and then I just sort of went overboard. I did have dates when I was in my freshman year, and one of them was a young boy named Sidney Pepper from Pueblo. And Sidney Pepper was this gawky young man, and I wouldn't let him kiss me. I didn't know anything about what girls did on dates and what was expected of them, so he didn't last very long. But he did introduce me to Jerry.
What was your first date like with him? Did you go on a date?
I don't know that we ever went on dates. I think we went to a meeting of the American Youth for Democracy.
Now there's a date. How romantic.
When I wrote about him to my parents, they were delighted. A nice Jewish boy from a dentist's household. But he was exciting. He had all these ideas. I still have a great sympathy with the ideas of communism. I think that those ideals have one lack, and that is they don't take into consideration humankind. They don't realize people can't swallow whole and don't want to be told. They need some part in their own destiny.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hands of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in a union.
The FBI followed us when we left school, followed us to New York. We were in New York for a year and interviewed us there, trying to get us to tell about other people. And then, of course, when we came back to California, we had long since given up any contact with the Communist Party. One day when I was teaching, the PA system said, "Mrs. Goodman, would you stay in your classroom, please? The FBI would like to come and talk to you." This was during the last class of the day. Instead of waiting to be fired, I quit. But that was the end of my teaching career. One of our best friends in college, also a member of the party, was the one who ratted on everybody in the cell. It was so disgusting. That whole McCarthy period is another period in my life that left me with such strong feelings about what's right and what's wrong in a democracy. That was just a terrible period. And then we moved to Shasta Road in Berkeley. Berkeley was fun. Berkeley was wonderful. Berkeley, you could be strange there, and everybody else was, and it was politically very wild, and I really enjoyed the time in Berkeley. Naomi was first. Jeffrey was the middle child. Rachel was my baby. I went to Esalen and worked with Fritz Perls. And I don't know what his genius of Gestalt therapy is, why that worked where nothing else worked. But I finally realized this is my life. I can't be unhappy all my life, which I had been, I was disappointed and unhappy for those 20 years mostly. My pleasures were my children, but you can't just live on that. So, after all these years of walking in the mountains, here I am living in the mountains. So, I suggested that we do a recipe book, and that I pretended that I had experience in editing, which I sort of did. Pulp magazines, And that was my entree into the community. It was like this first time the whole community had gotten together to do any kind of a project. It was very satisfying. I really loved it.
Seemed like people in Big Sur like to have a lot of potlucks.
They do it all the time.
Food is really important.
Food is very important.
What were some of the most unusual recipes in that book?
Unusual recipes?
Isn't there some wild boar or something?
Oh yeah, well that's usual. Probably Walter Trotter's. Charlotte and Wally were living 1 mile or so up in another little cabin, and there was a very obscure trail that nobody, as far as I could see, used between my house and their house, and I walked up there when I went visiting. So one day I went visiting up there, and on my way down, came around a bend on the trail, and a mountain lion was standing in front of me, a little ways up the hill. I had time to take off my backpack, reach in it, get out my binoculars, and look him in the eye. I felt no fear whatsoever, and he moved up a little ways and turned around and stared back at me, and we stared at each other for probably a minute, and then I went on my way, and I felt so blessed.
Yeah.
Somehow or other, the idea of living camping-like was something that I wanted to do all my life and never wanted to give up. And somehow or other, in my later years, managed to live in one of the most beautiful places in California and live so far away from the highway that it was sort of like camping out. I was thinking this afternoon when we had a family gathering to celebrate Anna's wedding and graduation, and sat at the lunch table and listened to all the excited talk, most of which, the things that really turned them on, everybody got really excited, were about fantastic new video games that you got lost in other worlds and stuff like that. And I had nothing to say. I realized I am so old-fashioned. I wonder how many of these people, these children, picked up my passion for the out of doors and for the land. But I know both my daughters spend a lot of time out in the boonies, walking and hiking and biking and doing all of that. And I think that's something that I inculcated in them, and I'm glad I did, and they're glad I did.